time. So what we will do between now and approximately 13:20 is accept questions from the audience. Again, if you'd be so kind, please keep your questions to one question at a time rather than two or three, and try to keep them concise so that we can take advantage of the gentleman to my left and draw on their expertise. So, who has a question they would like to begin with? Again, please wait for the microphone to reach you. Keep your hand up if you'd be so kind. There you go.
Yes, Steve Goodwin from USAID Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance. A question for Dr. Okumura, and that is, American hospitals run at a very high capacity, around 95%, so we don't have much depth for emergency or disaster response. What is the rough percentage of capacity that most Japanese hospitals work at, and do you have that reserve capacity for disaster?
Basically, in Japan, disaster designated hospital exists. They have capacity of the double of the usually state, double admissions, and double outpatient count, basically. But it depends on the hospital. But in Japan, in these 10 years, disaster DMAT, disaster medical assistant team, has been introduced, and in these disasters, DMAT, disaster medical assistant team, come from all over the Japan. Thank you.
Other questions? Please, here in the front.
4人の先生方、大変素晴らしいお話ありがとうございました。私は小川と申しまして、静岡県のシニアアドバイザーをやっております。もちろんミリタリーバックグラウンドです。グレン博士とブラウン大佐にご質問したい。グレン博士、冒頭のお話、素晴らしいお話だったんですが、日本は、東京はとにかく防災で、進んでいるという前提で話されました。ただやはりこれはブラウン大佐がおっしゃったように、文化についての価値観の共有や情報の共有が必要かなという課題を突きつけられたような気がしました。で、例えば東京は私自身も政府の危機管理に関わってまいりましたが、全くダメです。で、私が8年目に入っている静岡県も日本で防災先進権と言いながら全くダメなんです。で、その辺についての価値観の共有、情報の共有、文化についての理解というのを進めないとダメだろう。で、例えばブラウン大佐がいらっしゃる、カレッジステーションの TEACS、あそこを日本から見学に行った人間は1万人以上。でも TEACS と同じような危機管理要員の教育訓練施設は日本に一つもありません。国もまだ作ろうとしません。それからこれはアメリカ陸軍の1枚の資料がありましたけれども、これの裏側の方でクリティカルインフラストラクチャーについて一番上に大容量電力というのがあります。で、これは東京都の場合で言いますと、私は実際にいろんな組織のアドバイザーとして、テロリストや特殊部隊の立場で大規模停電をどうやったら起こせるかということで見てまいりました。一人のテロリストが24時間以上の大規模停電を実行することができる。で、回復もできない。 それ、復旧に出てくる電力会社の社員のそばを狙撃するだけで復旧作業は止まります。そういったようなことがあるにもかかわらず、ここでは、5段階評価の回復力が3、それから脆弱性が、についてもやはりちょっとその辺の問題が、入っているかどうかわからない。アクセス度3というのはこれはおかしいです。簡単にアクセスできる。そういったことを文化の、違いを理解する。お互いの組織を知る。ブラウン大佐はまさに東日本大震災の現場でそれを、実感されたわけですが、その辺についてこの会議をスタートラインとして次に進めていくためにお考えを伺いたいと思います。どちらからでも結構です。
You want to start, Steve?
Sure. I guess the one piece that I would recommend, and I know that to varying degrees, both the U.S. and Japanese already do this, and this was in direct result of the lessons that we learned, is to continue to implement the lessons that we learned during Operation Tomodachi and during the earthquake disaster support in down south and in Kobe, is to take those lessons learned and actually implement them in some form of exercises. And I'll just take some case examples that I saw. So after Operation Tomodachi, Northeastern Army once a year actually did a disaster relief exercise. And they brought in both 6th Division, 9th Division, supporting regiments. They also brought in members of the crisis management team at the Miyagi Prefecture, Sendai City, Ishinomaki City, and Iwate prefectures, and they did basically a tabletop exercise, and they instituted. And so I saw a significant increase in the number of civilian government agencies, EMS agencies, into that exercise that they started doing once a year. And so that's one example. From a mill-to-mill perspective, I think it's really important that we have these existing exercises between the U.S. and Japan. You have Yamasakura, we have the JXR, we have Orient Shield, we have Keen Edge. Those are just to name a few. That we have these opportunities by where we can not only exercise our warfighting functions, but also put in injects to exercise a disaster response scenario, whether that is a natural disaster, whether that is a cyber attack, or whether it's some other sort of disaster, and any combination thereof. I think it's important to not only be both ground to Army, but also include the joint services. So obviously this is going to take buy-in from the Joint Staff Office as well as U.S. Forces Japan, but also then include the, to the extent possible, the local, both Tokyo, Shizuoka, Kanagawa prefecture, and other prefectures that have crisis management teams, to include the civilian authorities into those exercises to the extent possible. And I know that for the Japanese that can be a real challenge in terms of coordination, making invitations, and developing those relationships to bring the civilian authorities in. But to the extent possible, if we can get to that point, that is really how I think we take this to the next level and the next step. Thank you.
I want to address the question also. It's a brilliant question, and it's one that has infinite number of nuances, unfortunately. First of all, the most obvious cultural difference that we have, if we have an outside organization or an international organization come and help in a megacity, is the difference between one nation's cultures and another, and those can be fundamental. Again, to me, the solution to this across the board is that we need to cooperate well beforehand. We need to plan well. We need to conduct those exercises, conduct those rehearsals. Now, it doesn't mean that when you do planning, you're going to bring every possible organization to bear. If it was the United States and we had a notional disaster in Los Angeles, obviously we know that perhaps Japan, perhaps Australia, perhaps some other countries would come, but I'm sure that there would be nations that we didn't identify. But the fact that we recognize there are cultural differences and we can identify some of those with the participants in that planning process, Japan, Australia, others, then raises consciousness that that is an issue, and so we're better prepared to deal with it when we actually deal with an event. Now, if that was the only cultural difference we had to deal with, actually life would be a lot easier. But I'm sure it's the same in Japan as it is in the United States. There are tremendous cultural differences within the country. So that if you have individuals from police departments, fire departments, the army that go from one part of the country to another, they need to be ready to deal with cultural differences in the way decisions are made, relationships between various members of the hierarchy. In addition, then, what we can do during that preparation, and again, it is so important that we prepare prior to an event, is we have a concept, I don't know if Japan does or not, called red teaming. So you are conducting planning, you're conducting an exercise or a rehearsal, and you bring the parties together that you think are going to be needed when you do have a disaster, a humanitarian assistance disaster relief exercise. But you have a red team that plays devil's advocate. And so if everything is going smoothly, they step in and they present some of the problems that would be realistic, but that are perhaps being overlooked. And so I think it's absolutely critical to have this other element that is there to sharpshoot an exercise and to play that devil's advocate role so that we identify issues before they come to the fore. Now, the third type of cultural difference that we have, and perhaps the one that is most difficult to deal with, is that between organizations within a given urban area, within a given city. Obviously, the police have their own culture, the fire have their own culture, the water resources people have their own. The mayor's office is different than the city council necessarily. They all have their own political agendas that they want to address, and so therefore, in a lot of cases, they do not want to reveal weakness or talk about where they might not be able to address a challenge because it could get out and it would be politically embarrassing. We need to overcome that. If it means that you're holding exercises behind closed doors so that people can be more frank, then that's absolutely essential. We had a very good question yesterday during the virtual terrain walk, and it was, does Tokyo have a single map of all its subterranean features, of all the sewage, pipage, the sewerage, I should say, of drainage from north of the city that evacuates water that would come, say, in the case of a tsunami or tremendous rains, all the electrical, all of the cell phone and other capabilities, all the subways that are underground, all of the shopping centers that are underground. Is there a map that has all of those rather than each of these entities having their own? And the answer was apparently not. And Major Dexter, who is still here, who's from New York, said he doesn't think New York has that as well. So we have these different cultures within the city that are either not sharing information or don't know that they should be sharing information. So we need to have a centralized organization. Maybe it's the city council. Again, it would have to be a cooperative venture because there is no one city council for all of a megacity. But we need to do a better job of bringing these various parties together, getting rid of those stovepipes, and starting to cooperate in front of rather than in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. Does that address your question, sir? Okay, good, thank you. Next question, if we will. Over here, Alessandro. Keep your hand up, please, and that way people can see where they need to take the microphone.
Hello, I am Lieutenant Colonel Alessandro Di Stefano. I belong to the Italian Carabinieri, and I'm currently deployed in the NATO Light Command Transformation in Norfolk. My question is to General Kobayashi, and I would be interested in knowing, in the Japanese situation, what is the relationship in case of man-made disaster, of natural disaster, which is the relationship of command and control between the militaries and the police? Because as far as I understood, the lead is of the Prime Minister, but I would like to know more on how then this goes into the tactical level between the police and the military. So who has the lead, if there is any sort of tactical control, tactical command, and what is the relationship? Thank you very much.
ありがとうございます。それぞれのレベルに応じてコマンドコントロールを作っていくことになるんですけれども、政府のレベルの中では政府で緊急災害対策本部というのができますので、そこでは総理が、本部長になって、そこに各省庁が参集をして、情報共有をして対策を取っていくということになります。それから都のレベルになりますと、都として災害対策本部を作ります。実際にその災害対策本部には警察、消防、自衛隊、それから海上保安庁も含めて調整チームが我々のところにやってくるということになります。我々の都の災害対策本部を中心としてそれぞれの活動を調整をし、そして情報共有をしていくという形になります。さらにその都の下には今度は基礎自治体というその区とか市とかという形のその基礎自治体がありますけれども、それぞれのところにもリエゾンがいて、それぞれのローカルのレベルで調整をするという、そういう構造になってます。答えになってます。
Next, please.
私は国際 NGO のピースウィンズジャパンというところに所属しております稲葉元隆と申します。私自身はメディカルドクター、医師で、救急専門医です。先ほど奥村先生のお話がありました日本の DMAT のインストラクターをしているものです。私の質問はですね、先ほどのブラウン大佐のお話の中でもあったような米軍ができる支援と実際にその現場で、求められているニーズのこのマッチングになかなか難しいところがあったというようなお話があったと思うんですが、そのような時にですね、私たちの NGO のような、世界のいろんなところで災害もしくは紛争時に支援をしているような団体がそういう国際的な支援の受け入れの時に日本にとって何かお役に立てるところがあるんじゃないかというふうに私はちょっと考えているんですけども、そのような視点からですね、民間の今日はこの日本とアメリカのその軍のお話が主かもしれませんけども、そのような中でこの NGO 民間がですねその間の中で何かお役にできることはないかというような視点で少しコメントをいただけたらと。どういうことがお役に立てそうか。私自身はそういう文化的な通訳というかトランスレーターのようなそういう仕事ができる可能性があるんではないかと思っているんですけども、コメントいただけないでしょうか。
I can take that on to an extent anyway. We again talked about this a bit yesterday during the virtual terrain walk. The concept of a coalition right now is generally conceived of one that involves elements of government. It could be a coalition that's purely military, it could be a whole of government or military with other elements of government, but rarely do we include NGOs, IGOs, faith-based organizations, commercial organizations. And there are difficulties in doing that, as you're well aware. One of the major ones is how do you share intelligence with organizations that, for example, in Afghanistan, we sometimes found that they had been deliberately infiltrated by our adversaries to collect information and intelligence and use that against us. I think that we need to, first of all, redefine or reconceive of what we mean by a coalition and start including not only those governmental assets, but also obviously the host nation and their assets that are sometimes overlooked or looked at separately, and NGOs and IGOs and the other organizations that you've alluded to and that I had mentioned as well. And we need to realize that in a coalition, not everybody is going to be equal. So obviously, some militaries will be more comfortable sharing intelligence more fully than they are with other militaries. It'll be likewise with other government organizations and with NGOs and IGOs. Also, of course, there are some organizations, NGOs, that are well known for not wanting to participate with governmental officials at all because they want to maintain their independence because they think that their funding sources will be threatened if they don't. We do need to be able to have various levels of release of intelligence, and even in that extreme where an organization does not want to participate in the least, both parties need to be convinced that there's mutual benefit. If nothing else, the NGO needs to make sure that the coalition knows where they are and where they're going to be for the next 48, 72, 96 hours, because otherwise they expose their personnel to inadvertently being engaged by friendly forces. On the flip side, the military or the coalition involving other government entities doesn't need to give all the information out or intelligence, but it might say, all right, you've told us where you're going to be 72 hours from now and in between now and then. Please, if you're going to operate, use this road and avoid this highway and this other road because we may be conducting operations and you will put yourself at risk. Now, of course, you immediately say, well, you've just exposed where your operations are going to be. That's not necessarily the case because we might suggest that the NGO not use 2 or 3 or 4 roads, and perhaps there are operations going on there, perhaps there are not, perhaps there are operations going on some of the roads and not the others. So you can avoid giving away too much information and sacrificing your operational security by providing enough to provide the NGO, the IGO, whomever, what they need to do their job and to protect themselves without really putting your own force or other members of the coalition at risk. But to me, again, if there's one thing that we need to bring to bear is that the partnerships need to be formed prior to the disaster. And it's not just a matter of having a token NGO that happens to be in an exercise. It's looking out and looking at all the NGOs, and so that both the coalition members, the traditional coalition members, can understand what the challenges are, but also that you understand what the difficulties are from the coalition perspective. Thank you. Good question. With the gentleman in the pink shirt, please.
My name is Hiroto Tanaka, representing Japanese NGO, like the previous person was. First like to thank you for the presenters for the very interesting presentations. I was in Daniel K. Inoue APCSS for the CCM 19, the complex, I don't know, CCM 19-1, crisis management.
Conference, whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you very much for the backup. I was there as a fellow, and I was the only one real civil person. All were from police, military, foreign affairs, and only NGO was there. And from this complex emergencies, we really need to have a joint venture of civil-military cooperation with the NGOs and the INGOs. However, like this conference, I don't know how many civilians NGOs are here, so we are really here to help. But some NGOs like Médecins Sans Frontières, they just step out if they see a military. They have a hardcore line of operation, hardcore principles. So, but that's fine, that's their principles. But we're not that hardcore, we're more open. We focus on human lives, not the ethics. So what we like to see more operation on the ground, and more people to know and to speak. And like you said, exchanging cards, just exchanging emails is just a start. But that will build an enormous relationship, joint venture at the end. So when I was there, there were 108 persons from 36 countries all over the world, and I finished my business card, even I brought 200. So it is really imperative to form a joint venture of civil military cooperation, with starting like a forum that easily can participate. Not, if you go to this conference, you labeled as a pro-military. No, that's not. We're pro-humanitarian, pro-lives. That's what we do. And I now based in Okinawa, and I'm now invited to the 3MEF HRT, which starts 29th July, conducted by the Center for Excellence Disaster Management in Honolulu as well. So I'd like to ask Colonel Brown and Glenn, Dr. Glenn, how do you think of that? Thank you.
Well, my first reaction is that even though there weren't as many NGOs and IGOs present as you would have liked, there were the police and the fire and the military, so at least we got a good start on the thing. I agree with you, we need to bring more of these entities together. I also know that just the same as my example of an issue in Los Angeles, you can't identify all the countries that might come. You can't identify all of your NGO, IGO, and other civil partners. So by having a robust participation, which means more than just one entity, you can start to identify the kind of challenges that you are going to confront. And that's very important because one of the things that the US military learned in spades in Iraq and in Afghanistan was that we have to have these civil affairs coordination centers, if you will, where you would have entities like NGOs and IGOs, perhaps ones you didn't even know existed, but certainly ones you hadn't worked with before, and they could come to this center and be told what sort of needs there were, what role they might play. Somebody there would help match their capabilities with the civilian population's gaps in coverage right at that point as far as what they needed to be able to do to recover or to sustain a level of living even in a combat situation. So your participation that you highlight as being so important is absolutely crucial so that those that will be manning these civil affairs coordination centers, as I'm referring to them, or are otherwise doing the planning and the design of exercises, can then identify the challenges, the types of challenges we're going to have. And as we say in the military, it's a lot easier to adapt off of a plan that exists than to start from scratch when you're confronted with a challenge. So that early participation is absolutely critical to establishing a foundation from which to build quickly when we do have an actual contingency that involves participants that we are otherwise unaware of beforehand. Does that get at your question? Okay. Steve, you have anything further?
I would just add, I think your point and the previous question and answer that we had regarding NGOs is very valid. They definitely bring capability to the disaster relief effort. I think, and I'd be interested to hear what my Japanese colleagues have to say, but when I was up there in Sendai, we had various non-governmental organizations and IGOs in the area, and I think from a policy standpoint, we have to tackle the policy issue in terms of intelligence and information sharing, in terms of what services and support we would provide to the NGOs and what they can provide to us. There's a lot of policy restrictions and things that we have to tackle first or simultaneously in parallel as we work to develop SOPs and ways that we can train together. And I think we have to handle the policy thing, and I'd be curious to hear from the Japanese side what policy restrictions or things that they have or experienced during Operation Tomodachi with NGOs or working in that type of environment, because I think the U.S. has their own policies, and I would assume that the Japanese would have similar policies that they'd have to talk to. Maybe Kobayashi-san, maybe you could.
ありがとうございます。今のお話の中でですね、その軍とNGO との関係っていうのをお話をされたとも思うんですけれども、もともと自衛官で今自治体にいる立場からしますと、その国外 で活動するという、日本の国外で活動するという、いわゆるそのローカルガバメントというのがあまり機能していない中で、軍が主導としてその場で活動している中での NGO との関係っていうのが、そこは協力関係は直接結ばれるんだと思うんですね。で一方、国内の災害の時というのは、やはりその自治体が中心となって、そこに警察、消防、自衛隊、あるいは NGO の方々に来ていただくという、そういう構図になるっていうのは間違いがないと思います。でそういう中でその NGO の方々っていうのは非常にさまざまな能力っていうか、そういうことを持っていらっしゃいますし、でまたその自治体側としてもさまざまなニーズがあるということがありますので、そこの我々としてやっていただきたいことと NGO の方たちの持っている能力とか、あるいはやりたいことっていうのをうまくマッチングをしながら、その我々として NGO の方の支援を受け入れていくっていうことなんだろうというふうに思います。で先ほどの話もちょっと出まして、通訳っていうお話もあったんですけれども、やはり我々としてその難しいと思っているのは、避難されている方のニーズっていうのはものすごく細かくて、多分自治体の要員だけでは集めきれないし、面倒も見きれないというところがあるので、そういう細かいところのケアっていうところにはやはり手をかけていただきたいというふうに思うのと、もう一つはその各国からの NGO の方たちが来られた時に、やはりそこもその地方の自治体では受け入れてその差配する能力っていうのはやはり限定されますので、そこのところの各国の NGO の方とのつなぎ役とか、あるいはそれをうまく活動のベースに乗っけてっていただくとか、そういうことを期待をするっていうのがちょっと自治体側としての感じになります。それで一応答えになってますかね。はい、以上でございます。
Could we, not to be rude, but I think we have only time for only one more. Could you go? Yes, thank you. Have to give everybody a chance.
すいません。小川先生、すいません。OB の田辺と言います。で、前職は東京都の危機管理官をやっておりました。で、今日はですね、ブラウン大佐とグレーン博士にちょっとお伺いしたいんですけども、ブラウン大佐はその全体像を把握をして、それで、要は作戦の目的、目標、そして終わりの段階をですね、予測をしてって、こういう話なんですけども、3.11 の時はですね、実は想定外の地震だったんです。で、今日の話はメガシティで東京都の話が主体ですので、首都圏の被害予測はあるんですね。だから被害予測の中で多分オペレーションができるっていう話であれば、そのような多分調整も多分効くんだと思います。ただ想定外になった時はですね、やっぱりそのできるとこからこうやっていかないと、多分オペレーションってうまくいかないんだと思います。全体像を把握してオペレーションやりましょうっていうのは多分間に合わないと思いますので、ですから文化組織だけではなくて、多分被害の状況ですね、これもよく確認しながらオペレーションをしないといけないんではないかなというふうに思います。だからその点いかがかなということと、それから博士にはですね、グレーン博士には今日はその、アジア地域でそのメガシティっていうのがいろいろありますっていうありました。でその観点から言うと、その他の地域ではこの日本のようにですね、もうその災害の状況っていうのはある程度見積もっているっていうような地域があるのかないのかですね。もしなければ多分米軍が主導でその災害対応ができると思うので、米軍のオペレーションというのは容易だと思うんですけども、日本の特性がそれ違うので、その辺をちょっと教えていただければというふうに思います。
Steve, you
I'll
wanna
go ahead and take the
first? Go ahead,
first
you go
part.
first.
I think you're very correct. It is hard and difficult to anticipate every type of disaster or incident that could happen, whether it's natural, man-made, that could go wrong in a megacity that would necessitate a coalition of forces to come and provide support. You're never going to be able to anticipate that. However, I think that there are some common throughout all types of, whether it's a disaster, a cyber attack, a terrorist attack, or combat operations that could be applied to a broad spectrum of, or a broad range of incidents. The points that I made in terms of understanding each other's culture, knowing how, in this case, how the Japanese conducted their coordination and their bureaucracy and hierarchy, the Japanese understanding how we coordinate things and having a mutual understanding so that when we go to coordinate together, when we ask the Japanese for something, we understand how that is going to impact their decisions that they make. And then go ahead and practicing how to navigate through those challenges in exercises and training, key leader engagements, subject matter expert exchanges. That sets a foundation to have a relationship that and a mutual understanding that could translate across a broad spectrum of types of incidents, regardless of whether it's a natural disaster, man-made, terrorist, or what have you. And so I think that it's important in forums like this to understand what those common themes are that could be applied, and then discuss concrete ways of how we're going to go ahead and rehearse and practice to navigate through those challenges. I think that would probably be my recommendation that we should consider and should take away from this conference.
I'd like to answer a bit of the question that you actually asked of Colonel Brown. One of the things that I've read, to Japan's credit, that after the 2011 earthquake of magnitude 9.0, they recognized that exercises such as that held in 2014, based on a 7.3 magnitude earthquake, were insufficient. And because of that, then future exercises and future preparations should include greater disasters than was otherwise thought to be the worst or amongst the worst that you would have to confront. So the lesson there is obviously we need to be constantly flexible in readying for the types of disasters we might need to respond to, both within a nation and more broadly. The other thing I think that's absolutely critical is maintaining the flexibility across our planning and our exercises and those rehearsals that I mentioned. I was struck by General Kobayashi's comment this morning that it was what I like to call first responders, that is neighborhood and community members, who were so crucial to survival during the collapse of buildings, such that those that were recovered by the community survived in 80% of the cases, while those that were recovered by the first responders in the traditional sense, police, fire, etc., only recovered 50% of the time, for obvious reasons that the earlier you can get aid to a member who is buried, the more likely that there's going to be survival. But that sort of flexibility, that sort of recognition that a previously, in many cases, unrecognized asset, and that is the citizen on the street, is hypercritical to reacting appropriately to a HADR type operation, is something that we need to train to and educate to. So kudos, because I have seen that be part of the Japanese preparations, Tokyo's preparations, and obviously it ties in with the disaster preparedness maps and that sort of thing. As far as damage estimates, to my knowledge, especially in those cities that are not as graced with wealth and education and a long cultural background as, say, Tokyo is, or other nations that are in developed countries around the world, I am not aware that there are a lot in the way of offerings with regard to what the damage estimates would be given a different, various types of disasters, I should say. So that could be my ignorance, but if in fact, and I'm sure that there are cities where they have not had the opportunity or simply don't have the resources or expertise to perform that kind of damage estimate, it struck me as interesting in that in my past, in my think tank years, I was asked to do evaluations with the team that looked at what cities are the most critical from the standpoint of possible combat operations and possible security operations in the military counterterrorism. What your question spurs is perhaps a recommendation that, given the fact that the types of contingencies that we are reacting to are more likely to be natural disasters or events that don't involve force-on-force combat, perhaps we need to go back and start looking at cities, megacities in particular, and other ones that are notably important strategically in a given alliance, in a given region, and start analyzing those from the perspective of what you're asking for, and that international teams could go into cities at the request of those urban areas authorities and do an analysis of if they're in an earthquake zone, if they're in a typhoon zone, and assist them with identifying what the damage estimates should be and what resources might be brought to bear. So I think, although the answer to your question was negative in my sense, it actually spurs a very legitimate recommendation that might come out of this conference. So thank you very much. I apologize, we're going to have to wrap it up at that point. If we could now ask the speakers from the first session to return to their seats, and General Brown, if you'd come up.